All right, welcome back. During this lecture, we are going to talk about another important aspect in programming. So, that is problem solving and algorithm design. So, we base our discussion on the basic knowledge that we already have using arithmetic operators, operator precedence rules, and the data types that we already know. But in general, when you have this problem solving algorithm design steps, this is a very crucial step in problem solving using computers, because we need to clearly think about the solution that we come up with, and then what are the pros and cons of our solution, and then evaluate its efficiency. While doing so, we get a better handle of how good our algorithm is, how good our solution is. This will essentially lead to a better program in the end, right? Now before we get there, so let's quickly revisit what we already know in terms of the programming language constructs of the C++. So we already talked about data types, especially how we are representing number types, and then strings, the characters, and true false values using Boolean data variables, right? Now when you have these data types, then so these data types associated with a set of operations that we can perform with the data types, right? Now the number data type, especially integers and doubles, we will have arithmetic operations. Now together with arithmetic operations, we have what is called operator precedence rules that allows us to figure out what is the order in which we are going to evaluate operations if we have multiple operations in an expression, right? For example, if we have x equals a times b plus c, so here we have several operators, so multiplication, addition, and the assignment operator. Now in here then we know that according to the operator precedence rules, multiplication has the highest precedence, so therefore this one will be executed first, and then this one will be executed second with the results of the first operation, and then finally we are going to assign the value from the right hand side to the left hand side variable x, right? So then this is pretty much something related to operator precedence rules that we discussed. Now in addition to that, sometimes when we work with data types, we might need to convert one data type to the other, that is integers to doubles, maybe doubles to an integer, so on and so forth. Now if the program automatically converts one data type to the other, so we call it implicit type conversion, right? Now for example, if I have a double variable x, and I'm going to assign 6 into this variable x, so then 6 will be converted into a double variable before we assign it to a double variable, because integer 6 cannot be stored in a double variable, right? So likewise, we talked about how we can read data from the keyboard using cin and cout objects. So what is the order in which we execute these operations, especially when you have cin, cout together with strings, characters, and double types, and so on and so forth. So and finally we briefly looked at the algorithm design, the step-by-step process in solving the problem. Now during this lecture, we are going to have a closer look at what the algorithm design process is, and then how to write the algorithm, and then by looking at the algorithm, so how we are going to develop our program. Okay, all right. So let's take our first example. So suppose we are going to write a C++ program that reads the length and the width of a rectangle from the keyboard, and then compute the area and the perimeter of the rectangle. So finally, after doing the calculation, we are going to display length, width, area, and the perimeter, right? Now the first thing when you look at a problem like this, so we need to have a good picture of what exactly we are trying to accomplish in this particular scenario, right? So then here then we have a general rectangle. So rectangles will have data members length and the width. Now using this length and the width, so we need to calculate the area and the perimeter, right? Now therefore for this particular program, so we will have length and the width as inputs, right? So using these inputs, we are going to produce these outputs, that is area and the perimeter. Now the next thing then we need to think about, so how we are going to get this output from the inputs given to us, right? Now in order for us to do this calculation, then we have to have some sort of an equation that calculate area and the perimeter based on length and the width. So that is basically the data processing part allows us to do this calculation altogether. Now we all know that to calculate the area and the perimeter of a rectangle, so we can use these two equations. So area of a rectangle is pretty much length times width, and the perimeter is length plus width times 2. So once you know these two equations, then so we can put together the detail that we already know into more algorithmic form, that is step-by-step process in solving the problem, right? Now the algorithm for this problem then can be written in the following form, where since we are going to read the data from the keyboard, so therefore we need to get the length of the rectangle and get the width of the rectangle. So since we are reading them from the keyboard, so we can write down from the keyboard, right? So likewise this is also from the keyboard, right? So then we can read those two data values from the keyboard. Now after getting these two values, so we can apply these two equations to calculate the area and the perimeter. So that's going to be the second and the third steps. After doing these two steps, so we can display the results after calculating area and the perimeter, right? Now by looking at this program, so we can construct algorithm, so we can construct our program for it. Now this algorithm is a pretty simple algorithm, so therefore by just looking at these statements, so we can identify corresponding C++ constructs for these statements, right? Now suppose I want to read length and the width from the rectangle, so therefore I need to define two variables. So length and the width may be in the form of integers, so therefore we are going to define two variables, one for length and the other one for width, right? And then so we need to read these two data items from the keyboard, so read length and then read width from the keyboard. So that's pretty much accomplishing the first two statements in here. So after reading these two data values, so then we can calculate area and the perimeter. So since length and the width are integers, so area and the perimeter are going to be integers as well. So therefore we can define an integer variable perimeter, and then we can say perimeter equals, so 2 times length plus width, right? So that's pretty much going to calculate the perimeter of the rectangle. Then we can calculate the area. So area equals length times width, right? So that will calculate these two outputs. So after doing these two, then we can display the results of it. So using cout statement, so you can say cout area equals area and then cout perimeter equals perimeter, right? So that will display area and the perimeter of the rectangle after doing the calculation. So I think this pretty much explain the process of solving a simple problem like this nature, where we first analyze what the inputs are, what the output is going to be, and then how we can get the output from the input doing certain amount of processing. And then we can put that in a process into an algorithmic form that will give us a step-by-step process in solving the problem. So by looking at the algorithm, so we can construct the corresponding C++ program for it, right? So now let's take another problem and then see how we can come up with the algorithm and then also the program for that particular problem, right? Now in this kind of scenario, so we want to write a C++ program that asks the user's weight in pounds and display the equivalent weight in kilograms. So it's pretty simple problem, However, this involves few things, right? Now, in order for us to do that conversion, so we need to divide pounds by 2.2 to get the kilograms, corresponding kilogram weight, right? Now, for this particular problem then, so let's try to figure out what the inputs and outputs are. For then inputs for this program is going to be weight in pounds, right? And then output from this program is going to be weight in kilos. Right? Now, in order for us to do this conversion then, so we need to apply the weight conversion formula given. So weight in kilos equals weight in pounds divided by 2.2. Right? So that will pretty much give us the inputs, outputs, and the processing needed to solve this problem, right? Now, by looking at this, so we can write down our algorithm for it. So when we are writing down our algorithm then, so let's try to write it down using again the step-by-step process. So algorithm is going to be, then first thing we need to do is to read weight in pounds from the keyboard. So therefore, first step is going to be get weight in pounds, right? So, and then convert to kilos using the following equation. So then weight in kilos equals weight in pounds divided by 2.2. Now, after doing this, we can display the results. Right? So it's a pretty simple algorithm. It has only 3 steps doing this whole calculation, but again that captures the essence of the problem solving process, where we analyze what the inputs are, what the outputs are, and then figure out how we can get the expected output from the inputs. All right. So let's try to construct the program using this algorithm. Now, when you are writing the program, then we need to think about the data types associated with this program. Suppose we are going to read weight in pounds as integers, so therefore we can define an integer variable called weight in pounds. Right? And the other thing we have here is that in the equation we are using a constant 2.2. So since it's a constant, so rather than putting it in the statement directly, so we can define that as a constant and use a constant in the equation, right? So then we can name this constant integer. So I'm going to call it weight factor, right? So we know that when you are defining constants, we make all the letters uppercase. So therefore, this integer weight factor is going to be, actually this has to be double because it's 2.2. So therefore, weight factor is going to be 2.2, right? Now the next thing we need to do is then read the weight in pounds from the keyboard. So then cin weight in pounds, right? Now after doing this, we can do the calculation for weight in kilos. Now this is where again we need to think about the appropriate data type for it. Since we are going to divide weight in pounds by 2.2, the corresponding result is going to be a double value. So therefore, weight in kilos has to be a double variable, right? So then we can declare a double variable, so weight in kilos, and that's equals to weight in pounds divided by the weight factor, right? So when you divide it by the weight factor, then so we are going to get a double value, and then that double value will be assigned into weight in kilos. So after doing this process, so we can display the weight in kilos. So this is going to be equals to the value that we just calculated. So weight in kilos, right? So that essentially covers the algorithm design process, the problem solving process, and also the program writing process. Think about the data types associated with it, so how to define constants, and then how to use everything together in constructing a simple program, right? So I hope these two case studies will give us a good idea about the problem analysis and the design process. So throughout the semester we'll introducing these topics as we move on with more complex problems, but at this point I think we have a clear picture of then what an algorithm is, and then how to come up with the algorithm once problem statement is given, and then how to use the algorithm to develop the corresponding C++ program for it. All right. Okay.